What's up, family, friends, everybody? Que me tica, que me encate. How are you? So I basically been receiving a lot of messages, and more than I usually do. Yeah, people asking, how do you say this in Nahuatl? Can you translate this from Nahuatl to English or English to Nahuatl? And so I thought I'd take the time and just make this little video since everybody's at home, everybody's on this learning curve, and hopefully it'll be informative for everybody. So this is basically going to focus on just some Nahuatl terms that we utilize within the danza community. Some of them that I hear are used incorrectly, mispronounced, and some of them that people just asked about. Now, first off, I just want to say that I'm not the Nahuatl pronunciation police, nor am I trying to be. It's really not about that. What it's about is learning, growing, and sharing what you learn so that other people can know what you know. And you have to be positive when it comes to language. Some people get really offended when you tell them what you're saying is incorrect or that word is a made up word. But take the time to at least listen and then do your own investigation to make sure that the information you're receiving is correct. So Nahuatl is an indigenous language of Mexico, and parts of Central America. It's widely spoken in roughly 14 states, basically in central and southern Mexico. It's spoken. There's many dialects. Some of them are mutually intelligible, meaning they can understand each other. Some of them are not. Within danza, what was incorporated by our elders was what is referred to as classical Nahuatl. Now, classical Nahuatl is just a term utilized by historians, linguists, people that want to describe or speak about the language and culture as it existed in 16th century Mexico, in the basin of Mexico, basically Mexico Tenochtitlan, or today what is referred to as Mexico City in the surrounding area, the basin of Mexico. So today nobody speaks this language exactly, classical Nahuatl, as it was recorded in the 16th century, which the 1500s. The Spanish priests first came, they recorded it. They recorded a lot of things. They taught the indigenous people of that area how to read and write. They in turn started recording histories. And so we have a wealth of information from this area. And because of the Mexica or the AZTECs are the most famous of the indigenous groups of Mexico, those were the sources that our elders in the danza turned to when they wanted to, what I call, re-indigenize the conchera dances into what we basically have today, which is the Azteca or Mexica style of dancing, where the traje is the language. So that started in the 30s and just gradually progressed. Today, some danza groups are using modern dialects, Huasteca, from Guerrero, different places. But the primary ones that we use, that you hear in the songs, the alabanzas, the prayers, invocations, those are from the classical Nahuatl, which are recorded primarily. The primary sources everybody's using is the Dictionary of Molina and the works of Sahagún, such as the Florentine Codex, etc., and Garochi. So that's what I'm going to be referring to. And that's going to be our source material, primary source material. First thing, so the first word is Nahuatl. Um, I hear people say Nahuatl, 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 and they do that all the time. Even here in Mexico, they do it all the time. And then I tell them, no, Nahuatl, Nahuatl. And they'll say, oh. And then they'll just say it again, Nahuatl, Nahuatl. And this TL is like really tripping people up. But it's one sound and it should be pronounced. So the way to pronounce that is you, I think there's other videos on there, but basically begin to pronounce the T. So like Nahuatl, Nahuatl. And then gradually you're pronouncing the L right after the T, but almost in the same fluid motion. And instead of opening your mouth, you're releasing the air through the sides. Nahuatl, Nahuatl. You're almost gonna hear like a clicking, like a, and that's basically it. If you can do like that, you can do Nahuatl, Nahuatl. So anywhere that ends with a TL at the end, Nahuatl. That's the sound. And takes practice, but practice it, because some people get lazy and they just say Nahuatl with just a solid T at the end and not pronouncing that TL. The Spanish didn't have that sound in their language, so they utilized two of their letters to represent that, a T and the L. But you have to start looking at that as not two separate sounds. It's just one. In Nahuatl, it's one sound. So the first word I want to talk about is that I often hear people mispronounce and say is the word for thank you, which is tlazohli, 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 tlazohli. Some people say, I've heard them say tlazohli, or they write it with a tli, the TLI at the end. That is 100% incorrect. There's no primary source whatsoever where that's written like that. It's grammatically incorrect, and there's no dialect, ancient or modern, that uses a TLI at the end of this word. Now, why is it grammatically incorrect? This is probably the strongest argument. TLI is what they call a nominal suffix. That means it goes only on nouns. It's combined suffix to a noun stem. Nahuatl is made up of stems and affixes. Affixes are basically prefixes, suffixes. They go at the end. Prefix goes at the beginning. The stem will go in the middle. Tli is a noun suffix. These noun suffixes are called absolute suffixes. Absolute suffix means that it's not possessed. It's just by itself. So in Nahuatl, there's four main suffixes for nouns, absolute suffixes for your basic noun. They are tli, as in my name, Cuauhtli, Cuauhtli. They are TL, as in Nahuatl. They are Li, as in Cali, house, which is Li is actually a variant of Tli. And then they are IN, as in Citlalin, star, Citlalin. The word, as we're saying it, tlazohli, is a verb. That means it's going to have a verbal ending. The T is in fact a verbal ending, and the mati is in fact a verb. The whole thing is a verb. It means to thank somebody. I could say nimis tlazohli, and that means I thank you. But instead of saying that long, people say tlazohli, simply thank you. It's almost like saying thanks. So tlazohli. Now, some people break it up and they just say tlazo. I see that a lot. And I don't know if that's like a Cali thing, from Califas, we like to break things up, create our own languages. I don't know, but it's not a good idea with Nahuatl to do that because, as I said earlier, Nahuatl is made up of stems and affixes. So each part of the word has a meaning. Give you a great example. My daughter's name is Mocuepani. Mocuepani means she always comes back. Now when you say her full name, Mocuepani Cuauhtli, that means she becomes an eagle, because Mocuepani has two meanings. Some people, for some reason, find it very difficult to pronounce Mocuepani, and they need to decolonize their tongues. Everybody talks about decolonize this. Well, decolonize your tongue and learn how to speak a person's name. It's one of the most respectful things you can do is acknowledge somebody by their name and to pronounce their name correctly, in my opinion. So they don't do that, and I hear them and they say mocue. Now there's a big problem with that, because you cannot just take as part of a Nahuatl word and use it and think its meaning the same thing. It doesn't. Mocue actually means something. And in Nahuatl, it means your skirt, su falda, your skirt, that a woman wears. It's made up of the word mo, which means your, and que comes from quait, which is skirt. So what you're calling her is your skirt instead of her name, which to me has significance, it has power, it has influence. Mocuepani Cuauhtli. So it's incorrect, and you shouldn't do that. So when you're doing that with the word tlazohtli, you're also doing the same thing. You're saying tlazo, and tlazo has, while the stem tlazo has a meaning, and it comes from the word tlazohtli, so which means something precious, something nice, something worthy of esteem, basically something precious. When you just say tlazo, you're not saying nothing, because tlazo has no meaning. Now we can all agree to utilize that, that's fine, but it has no historical meaning. It has no real meaning. You wouldn't be able to go to a Nahuatl speaking community and say tlazo, and they would be like, what? They wouldn't understand you. So that's that. So the word is tlazohli. Secondly, I don't never hear anybody really say you're welcome when people say tlazohli. Nobody knows how to say it, or nobody's learning how to say it. So I'm going to tell you the 4 ways to say it in classical Nahuatl. There may be another way, a 5th, who knows. But there's 4. So the first one is amotlain. Amotlain means basically you're welcome. It's like de nada, and it's from amo. Akmo means no, and tlain means what. Amotlain. Sometimes that's shortened into a shorter form, which is amotlen. Means the same thing. The next way, the third way, is atlain. Tlain means what, and is a negative particle prefix. Basically, it negates whatever you're saying, so it's making it like no, or not, or don't. And it's the part of, also a part of the word amo. It's the very first part, and the last one is amitla. Amitla means, it has a slightly different meaning, but it has the same sense. So instead of de nada, it's more like it's nothing. Like it's nothing. It is from the word amo, the first part, amo. That comes from amo, and itla. Itla means something so amitla. And I'll just throw this in there. But in Jalisco, we don't say either, none of those. We say amoteno, amoteno, amoteno. And that means de nada, or you're welcome. So going on to the next word real quick, because I don't want this to be a super long video. So we hear the word for the sun, and I hear people say a lot. They say Tonatiuh, Tonatiuh. There's two reasons that's incorrect, but the first and biggest reason is the U sound that people are saying. U does not exist in Nahuatl. This sound does not exist in Nahuatl. And the UH that you're seeing at the end of the word does not represent a U sound. It doesn't exist. It may exist in a few modern dialects, a U sound, but that's usually found wherever you usually would find an O sound. Oh, because they're close in the scale. If you look at the scale of verbs, U is right under O. So sometimes that O gets changed into a U or U type sound. But this isn't the case here. So in classical now, there is no U sound whatsoever. So anywhere you hear a person say U, they're saying that incorrectly. So what UH represents is a W sound. Now, this is the interesting part about this, is people learn from books. Nahuatl, classical Nahuatl. That's how it was brought into danza originally, because the people weren't, most of them were not fluent speakers. They didn't grow up speaking language. So they learned from books. And the thing is that when you get a book that was written in the 1500s, you cannot take that word and read it and say, oh, this word, this is how you say it, because you're utilizing your modern day understanding of what those symbols, the alphabetical symbols, what each one represents as a phoneme, as a sound. They don't carry over to 500 years ago. Likewise, if you're an English speaker, you're going to equate the English speaking alphabet to what the Spaniards wrote. And we all know Spanish and English letters don't have the same significance. The other thing is, in the 16th century, when the Spaniards came here, there was no agreed upon way of writing Spanish, their language. So today you could write a word in Spanish and I could say, hey, that's incorrect, that's spelled wrong. And vice versa in English, and we could all agree upon that. We could look it up on a dictionary online and everybody's agreeing. Back then it wasn't that way. So we have this W sound that's in Nahuatl and in some Spanish words too. And each group, within the Catholics church, the different I'm gonna call them sects, the friars, the Jesuits, etc. They would utilize their own mode of recording or writing. I mean, majority of things were agreed upon, but some things were not. This W was one thing that wasn't. So sometimes they would write the W as a V. Sometimes they would write it at HU, like we see in Chihuahua, the state, or the dog. Sometimes they would write it as a simple U, and sometimes they would write it as a UH. So in order to pick up an old school dictionary, you kind of have to become a quasi-linguist. You have to study not only the language and what sounds are in the language, but you have to understand how the Spaniards were writing, what sounds they assigned to each letter, and what they represent at the time and what they should represent today. There was many sounds in Nahuatl that didn't exist in Spanish. So they had to either make up a letter, or what more often than not they did is they utilized two letters. They combined it to represent one sound, like with the TL. And that's what they did in this case with the UH. So Tonatiuh is not Tonatiuh. It should be pronounced as a W. Tonati, Tonati, Tonati. Likewise, the accent has to shift to the na part, Tonati. Because in Nahuatl, there's the accent is always on the second to last syllable. Not like in Spanish, but it's always in the second to last syllable. So when I say Tonatiuh, I'm placing that syllable on the U or the I, the preceding I vowel. That's incorrect. So it has to be Tonati. Now this W that's found, this UH, this W, it's kind of hard to pronounce at the end of words. You could practice. It's almost like saying ew, like when somebody says ew. It's almost like that, but it's not a oo sound. It's ew. So ew with the I W. Ew. Tonatiuh, 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 Tonatiuh. That's the correct way. So when you're practicing, just break it up into syllables. This term has 4 syllables. To, na, tiu. 3 syllables. Excuse me, correct. So syllable is a consonant and a vowel, or a consonant, vowel, consonant. So the first part is to, na, tiu. Where does the emphasis goes? And it goes on to the second to last. The na. Tonatiuh. Tonatiuh. Now, when W sound is found at the end of a word in Nahuatl, it has a tendency to be devoiced. What does devoiced mean? Devoiced means that it's not audible. It's still pronounced, but there's no vibration in your vocal cords down here in your throat. So it's devoiced. So it's like you're gonna pronounce the W, but instead of pushing the air through your throat to make this vibration here, you don't. And so it becomes devoiced. It's almost not heard. You can't really hear it. So you don't have to worry too much about trying to master that W sound at the end of a word, you, but practice it. In some modern dialects, because that sound is devoiced, they've lost it. They don't even pronounce it. They just pronounce Tonati, Tonati, and that's it. Tonati, Tonati is the sun. So Tonati, Tonati, not Tonatiuh. That brings me to the second word, and then I'm going to end it. So we have this word that people use a lot when they're like in prayers or songs, and it's a turquoise Lord. Translate to turquoise Lord, and it's for the fire, you know. And now, so in Nahuatl, fire is tlek, tlek, T-L-E-T-L, tlek. But when we speak to the different parts of creation, that you would utilize either metaphoric words, calendar words, or other calendar names to address these things, to reference these things. So the fire was often represented, addressed as the turquoise Lord. And I hear people pronounce this as Xiotecutli, Xiotecutli, Xiotecutli. And this is 100% incorrect. And the reason it's incorrect is there's 2 reasons really. But one is what we just learned, the U, the UH. So we already learned that there's no word and Nahuatl. None. None. That have the oo sound. So when you say shiu, you're mispronouncing that. Remember that UH is a W sound. So the first part, this is a compound term. It's what they call a compound noun. It's basically two nouns came together to make a new word. So turquoise and Lord. So the first part is shiu, 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 shiu. Not shiu, not shiu, shiu. X-I-U-H. Basically, S-H-E-E-W sound. Shiu. I'll write it out here. That's derived from the word shiwik. Shiwik. Shiwik means the year, turquoise, and it also means plants. It can refer to a plant in general. So you hear that, shiwik, shiwik. You hear the W there, the we. But when nouns combine, the absolute suffixes at the end are dropped. Remember we talked about that. So shiwik, the absolute suffix is a TL. That's dropped because it's combining with the new one. Likewise, the preceding I is what they call a weak vowel I. That's dropped. What you're left with is a HU. Well, instead of just keeping it as HU, what the Spanish did is they just reversed it. When it's at the end of the word, or they would reverse it to UH. It still had the same meaning though. It was a W. They knew that, and then the indigenous people that were writing that, they knew that. Now we don't know that today because we're newly learning the language, but that's a W sound. So shiu, shiu. It's not shiu. It's not shiu, 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 shiu. So the second part, the gutli, is, this is probably one that like I really hate hearing. And it's really hard to pronounce for some people, so it's not anybody's fault. But two things here. The first part is gu, the gutli, the gutli. There's no sound in Nahuatl for gu. That sound does not exist in Nahuatl. So if you're saying the gutli, you're saying that wrong. And this term, Lord, is found in some other very important terms, and as far as like addressing the creations. So I'll basically try to explain why they wrote it this way, but what it means and how to pronounce it. So the way it's supposed to be pronounced is delkli, 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 delkli. So what you're hearing is a T-E-W followed by a K or a C, and then the suffix tli. Delkli, delkli, delkli. The Spanish recorded this word and this sound in basically three different ways. They would spell it C-U-H or UC or I think CU, but the first two are the primary ways. So CUH or UC. Why they did that exactly like that, I don't know. But remember that UH or the U, it represents a W. Now, obviously you can't really, it's hard to pronounce a K before a W. To follow that up with the W sound. So it's pronounced Teo, Teo, not Teu, Teo, Tew, and then the K. You have to get that right in there. Delk, 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 Delkli, 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 Shildelkli, 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 not Shiltekutli. That kind of sounds more cool, but that's not the way. So it's Shiltekli, 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 Shiltekli. You can almost hear how a person listening to it could mistake those sounds or confuse them or not understand how to write them down. But that's the correct way to pronounce that term. I'll do a follow-up if people ask for it, if they want to know more terms and how to pronounce them. Just feel free to ask me anytime. That's what it's about. Learn your language, decolonize your mind, your thoughts, and do your best. And if this isn't your language, it's not your ancestral language, but you're in danza or whatever, then do your best to respect that language and learn it the right way. I think that's the utmost respect. And when you start to learn your language and you start to think in your language, it changes the whole way that you perceive the world, and it's going to open up a whole nother reality to you. But when you're studying the language, you have to put aside all your preconceived ideas and Western connotations that we've been so brainwashed with. Come at it like a baby, like you know nothing, and study hard, and don't just take my word for it. Study hard, and if you want some sources, just hit me up. I got you. Tlaxcomati, and I'll hopefully be making another one soon.